So, the Conservatives doing good things, and who is it? It's Kemi Badenoch, because of course it is. So,
Yeah, there are like 3 Conservatives that do good things.
yeah, Kemi Badenoch being probably the best one. I mean, maybe her and Liz Truss. Love it. Anyway,
Yep.
So this is the story. UK Equalities Minister warns that white privileged rhetoric causes a less cohesive society. Yeah,
Completely true, obviously.
not controversial in the slightest, you would think, but of course this goes against leftism, and a Conservative is doing that, which, suspect, I guess.
Finally,
How dare a Conservative oppose communism? So the Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, wrote a recent op-ed for The Telegraph that the concept of white privilege is stoking divisions and marginalising the most disadvantaged in society, being the white working class, being the ones who are least performing in education and wealth and all the rest of it when compared to other groups on a whole. But that's the group no one wants to talk about.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't go along with Marxist narrative, doesn't advance Marxism, so not worthwhile. But then that weird though. Like
if anything, it specifically resists Marxism.
Like the working class is no longer useful for Marxism. What a world.
Yeah, but I mean, this is just the repackaging of Marxist theories, isn't it? It's basically how can we drive wedges between groups in society to create destabilization to eventually bring down capitalism.
And the discovery from the Marxists over the last 200 years that the working classes of the world, not revolutionary forces.
No, they're far right.
Therefore, they're not interested in this group. They're instead trying to do it on racial and gender lines.
And as the Socialist Workers' Party pointed out, we can't support England in the football because that means unity across all of the classes. And that's the very opposite of what they're looking for.
So, Roy writes in here, in the Western Marxist school of critical theory, white privilege is characterized as social privilege that benefits white people over non-white people. Writing for The Telegraph, Badenoch affirmed that the use of this phrase makes white Britons, quote, feel conscious about their race, while reinforcing the notion that everyone and everything around ethnic minorities is racist, creating a less cohesive society.
Well, she's not wrong.
True. I mean, I love the fact that she's pointing out there it's the purpose of using such a phrase and such a mindset is to make white Britons more conscious about their race, as in white privilege, I can't remember her name.
Robin DiAngelo.
Robin DiAngelo points out that's what she wants to do in the Critical Race Theory textbook, all of them laying out that's exactly what we want to do. And what is raising racial consciousness other than racism?
Well, it's Nazism.
It is, I want society to be aware of its race, so then we can politicize things along those lines.
Yes. To make each individual agent a political representative of their race.
Yeah, and we want to do it for socialist purposes, which is why you say it's Nazism. Yeah. That's not just Godwin's law or whatever.
No, that's not me. And I very rarely call things actually, I rarely say Nazi to anyone because it's not usually a useful thing to do. But like philosophically, this is actual. Socialism. Yeah, this is actually what the Nazis were. And I like what she's written here. White privilege, far from helping to combat racism, is actually stoking divisions and marginalizing the most disadvantaged in our society. That's true because the government recently did their race report and go, okay, so how are the races being held back? And it says, oh, well, white people are being held back, actually. The white working class are being massively held back. And if you tell them, well, you're privileged because you're white, it's like, okay, well, they're going to be sat there in their 2-bedroom council houses with 4 kids and barely any food being like, right, when do I get that?
Let's apply for a job. Go on the government website. Can't apply if you're white.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the point, isn't it?
In privilege.
It's stacking the deck completely against a bunch of people who already have the deck stacked against them.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, this
racist lines.
Op-ed, I presume, is in response to her department publishing said research, and we'll get into the people who oppose that in a minute. So she says, the phrase white privilege is unnecessary and antagonistic, much as some theorists think it is essential for tackling racism. How on earth would it be? That doesn't make any... Like, Kemi is totally right because she's disavowing it, but I love the idea that the people are trying to tackle racism by making racial slurs against one another, essentially. So, of course, that's not going to help things.
I love the idea of tackling racism by pathologizing an entire race.
Yeah. So, by tackling racism, the fact is there is an active and fairly toxic political debate around it.
Fairly toxic? Just fairly?
I mean...
The only criticism of Kemi I have is she's not going far enough here. Horrifically toxic. Not worth talking about.
They are openly saying we reject Martin Luther King's adagum of... colorblindness. We want racial consciousness, specifically along the lines of black racial consciousness being in power, because we tried it with black nationalism and it didn't work. It's not palatable to the white liberal public. Their words. Critical Race Theory textbook. The intro, is which they lay out what they are thinking.
Yeah.
All the more reason why the phrase should not be taught in schools unless it is explained that it is also highly contentious. So this I can see. So she has made this point before. If you go into a school and you teach critical race theory, if you go into a school and you teach this Marxist nonsense, and you do not have anything else, if you just propagandize the kids, you're breaking the law, and we will imprison you or criminalize you for doing so.
Based.
Correct thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's why she says on there, unless you explain it's highly contentious, here's the opposing point of view and all the rest of it, which no one is going to do, because when you actually lay out the opposing point of view being colorblindness, everyone's like, yeah, why would we believe in the Marxist critical race theory?
Don't know, but I mean, they do expressly say in that critical race theory textbook that this is the purpose of this is to undermine the classically liberal foundations of the United States, to overthrow it for the Marxist revolution. So why the hell wouldn't you just ban it outright on the fact that it's a subversive insurrectionary ideology?
In the same way Nazism is.
Exactly, yeah.
Racial socialism.
You don't teach that in schools. I don't know why that's controversial.
But I mean, to say that you could let it all out, I can see that argument. So she says, as someone who grew up in Nigeria, where there is only one skin color, but over 300 ethnic groups, the more ethnic identity is emphasized, the weaker the national identity becomes. This is a dangerous trend for a multi-racial society where we need to lean on what we have in common, not emphasize our differences.
Brilliant. It's brilliantly put. I mean, same thing in Europe, really. I mean, there's one skin color, but loads of different nations. So what now?
Yeah. Trying to pathologize things on skin color is a complete waste of everyone's time.
We need to talk about French privilege.
Yeah. And again, it demonstrates the Americanness of it, the fact that it comes from this American view of white and black. And when you go to Europe, it's like, well, they're all white, but they're French, German, Romanian, Russian, Polish.
I love this. Europeans and Africans are just like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense.
Happens in South America as well.
I bet, yeah.
Not jobs, but I like one of the comments under here. So George comments.
I just love the idea that Europeans, Africans, Americans are lunatics.
I suppose the Asians are getting in on that too.
Yeah, I guess they are. Yeah.
You have Asian privilege.
And the thing is, they fail to understand that, like, with these sorts of old world national identity groups, because they're so old, because there's such age in them, that there is a kind of understanding of the propriety of the national or ethnic group, right? So you can get this reading back all through history. Like, things are never characterized by skin color, obviously. They're characterized by self-identity, by like the collective self-identification of an ethnic group. So it'd be like, the Assyrians defeated the Sumerian incursion in like the 700s into what is now Iraq, right? No one's talking about race. No one's talking about any of that. That doesn't make any sense, right? And this is the sort of old world thinking about social groups and national political groups. It's always based on like the actual characteristics of the culture rather than like the skin color. You'll get a description of what they look like. So when you first hear about the Huns, they're short, stocky, swarthy, narrow-eyed men from the steppes, right? They're very ugly, from the perspective of the people writing about them. All of them, and they're
Hun-phobic of them.
But they come from a very rough place. But they were very rough people. But it's not about like. No one's like, oh, racial supremacy. Everyone's like, oh my God, the Huns are going to kill us all.
What's interesting, though, is you can get this thinking from Americans, even in a time in which they're practicing segregation and all the rest of it. Woodrow Wilson, when he came over in World War I with his forces to reinforce the Allies, at the negotiating table of what should we do to the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians, overwhelmingly, the thing from America, their biggest demand, was self-determination for different ethnic groups. Poland. Polish self-determination for the Poles. Yeah. And then the same for the Croats, and so on and so forth. So that they should be able to have their nation on the basis of their ethnic group, not racial collectivism or anything like this.
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Then we have to have a United States of Europe, and I don't want that.
Yeah, no one's arguing for that. Stupid idea.
Yeah.
But George mentions on here, Kemi is right on the money again. Can we have her as PM rather than this progressive weakling Boris? I gotta say, I'm getting quite jealous. And if I was Boris, I'd be quite worried that Kemi's outbasing me. So,
I mean, the same with Priti Patel. We'll have migrant camps somewhere off the coast of Africa. It's a good idea.
She's got to do it first.
Well, yeah, she has to. But I mean, she's apparently going for it. So,
Kemi has reinforced what was already law, which is you cannot teach this sort of stuff without explaining the context and the fact that it's contentious. And here's the other opposing point of view and all the rest of it, because it's the proper way to do education, not political indoctrination.
Well, that's what education is. Indoctrination is where you specifically hide information that is pertinent to the discussion in order to make sure they don't know that there's an alternative point of view.
So if we go to the next link, I just wanted to compare this to an MP whose example I found recently, which intersects with her report. So they released the report, as I mentioned, about white pupils being the least successful group as a proportion. And as we said before, our position on all of this, there's an inequality within the racial groups in the UK, is, government, sod off.
Yeah.
Want nothing to do with you people. Them coming in and being like, now positive discrimination for whites. No, don't want any positive discrimination. No. Sod off in the first place. It was you guys who caused this problem. Now get out.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally the negative discrimination of the government blocking off avenues of advancement to white working class that is causing this.
Ideally, the entire Equality Department to be disbanded, but that's not what's happening. So instead, we have to look at what the Labour response to this is, the guys who brought in all of this.
Just to hammer that point home, Conservatives, why do you have an Equalities Department? That's the sort of thing they'd have in the Soviet Union. Get rid of it.
So let's talk about the black MP who was on the committee talking about this report. So if we can get up the first image here. This is what happens when there's an inequality against people with non-white skin. As you can see, she says, if Black Lives Matter in this country, then let's start by closing the wage gap at Kemi Badenoch. Because an inequality against brown-skinned people is of highest importance and must be taken very seriously.
She's going to be making like 70 or 80 grand a year. I don't want equality. That's gonna chop her wage in half, probably.
Probably make it more as a minister, actually. So, but
there we go. Even more reason not to have equality.
But there's her tagging her, claiming about like, wow, there's inequality against black people, brown-skinned people, I should say, rather than just black. But she uses the term black here. Yeah. And then the next one, if we can go to it, the next image, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people disproportionately paying the price for this pandemic. Of course, massive concern.
COVID is racist.
Yeah, this is Labour logic that there's a process that has no racism in, but it produces different outcomes for different groups of ethnicities.
Because an arbitrary characteristic. Different lives.
An arbitrary characteristic as well.
Oh, yeah.
Pick any older.
Yeah, you could have picked anything, yeah. Tall people, short people. Yeah.
Like, it's stupid logic, but she says, I agree that TUC, time for change. This pandemic has shone a spotlight on racism and inequality. Okay, if that's her thinking, then of course, if she was being consistent when it came to the report on pupils, white pupils performing poorer, she should have been all there and been like, right, that inequality needs to be stamped out too. Because
Kim Johnson, White Lives Matter.
Yeah, no, she wasn't inclined to do such a thing. So if we go to the next image, this was Guido reporting. This was her and the other Labour MPs who all decided to oppose the report. They said they all disavowed the report. They voted not in favour of its findings.
So they're in favour of the white working class being subject to discriminatory laws against them, hiring practices.
Well, in this report, they didn't go into the discriminatory laws. That would be another thing, which
we've talked about at length.
Yeah, as liberals, you could actually say this needs to be gone. But in this report, it was just the outcomes. It was just the outcomes show that white working class Brits are the ones lowest performing in education, next to, I think it was the Gypsies. Mm-hmm. And there's, of course, the structural problem there as well. But the Gypsies don't accept...
Yeah, they actively reject civilization.
So there's that.
What are you supposed to do?
So then the next image is her talking about this. What was her response to when there's a racial inequality against white-skinned people? It's not a race issue. It's an issue of poverty, underinvestment in class.
Oh, that's weird. That's weird. Really, really coincidental. That just when the pendulum has swung back and it turns out that you're the one who holds institutional power, that suddenly racism isn't a problem.
Not buying that she's brown either, she's clearly white. But the thing of just like, her race socialism goes as far as helping white people. Once there's an advantage that could be levied towards white people, she abandons the whole thing. And of course, race socialism is no longer important. Don't you know I'm a liberal? Well, this is not about race. This is about underinvestment.
Yeah.
Golf. People are awful.
But I hate using the term like anti-white because it sounds dog whistly. But I don't know how else you would describe that kind of opinion. Like literally, I'm for every race getting advantages. Because they're suffering. It's like, okay, but now they're all doing better than the white working class. Do they need an advantage? No. Because they're white.
White people. That's our opinion.
That's it. That's all it is.
You may feel squeamish about the term anti-white. Don't, because that's reality. We would say the same for if it was anti-black, if it was anti-Asian, so the rest of it. In which case it follows that anti-white is perfectly an acceptable thing to use.
I mean, the Ku Klux Klan are anti-black. That's fair. You know? Yep. Like, there's no question, you know, like... The Islamists are anti-Jewish, you know, there's no question of it. These people seem to be actively anti-white.
They're proud of it too.
Yeah, if only we could abolish racial politics.